Is the K1 Max as good or better than the Bambu? So I've had this printer for a few months now. I've had this printer for probably a year now. And I really wanted to spend some time with this printer before I made this video, since the K1 launch was a little messy. I have about 150 hours of print time into it, and in the grand scheme of printing, that's not a ton, but I really wanted to get this video out. So setup for these printers were about the same. I did a video setting this machine up when I first got it, and it was my first printer, and I've learned a ton since then. But setup for this thing was super easy, and I would say it's pretty comparable to this. It was essentially the same thing. You take it out of the box, remove the foam, undo a couple screws. It goes through its sequence and updates for about 15, 20 minutes, and you can pretty much print a Benchy out the gate. So I would say they were both about an hour from unboxing to printing a Benchy.
And then we'll just do a quick overview of the printer, so if you decide to buy this printer, you'll know what to expect. Came with a Hyper PLA in white, some odds and ends, and then like a 3D printing starter kit. And then I'll never understand why they put these on the back of the printers, as most people probably have them up against the wall. But to combat that,
I added this Sunlu filament dryer, and it just runs out the back. So it's a lot easier to just switch the roll. Versus the Bambu also has a filament holder on the back, but if you buy the AMS, it doesn't matter because it just feeds in its own thing.
And then this has a similar startup sequence to the Bambu. It's just a little less thorough and takes a little less time. And just like that, 16-minute Benchy. We'll talk more on this later as we're going to go print for print against the Bambu.
So software, which software is easier to use and better? And in my opinion, the Bambu slicer is way better, which is like a play off of the Kira slicer, I believe. And I just am not a big fan of Creality print. It's just weird. Like navigation in it is just not cohesive, and it's just not as organized as Bambu. And the auto supports are just not good. You can kind of like paint them on, which is what I've been doing, but it's just, Bambu's is way more streamlined. I probably will, after this video, switch over to like Kira Slicer, but I'm also concerned about that when I see others having problems like Kira Slicer isn't working the fans properly, or you're not getting the LiDAR to work, or just stuff like that. And also, for the sake of the video, I wanted to use the software that came with the machine to give it, again, the most honest review I can.
And here I'll show you an example of the auto supports. It just kind of blasts the supports right through the model, and they do come off easy, but it's really annoying, and I just don't know why it has to do that. Maybe it's something I'm doing, but it's just finicky every time I tried it. And here's another example. It just refused to support this bone in this ghost dog's mouth, and I just ran it because I couldn't get it to add a support there, and it failed as expected. But the overall print quality looks fine. It's nice and smooth, there's not any really noticeable layer lines, so no complaints there. Then I printed this bison skull, and in the bottom here you can see where their supports were, and it's actually relatively clean. It's a little funkiness, but the Bambu does the same exact thing. Overall, the quality is really good, and the supports usually come off pretty easy. Sometimes you'll get some ones that are hard to come off, but overall I can't really complain. Then I also printed this hand. I just thought it was something that looked difficult to print, and this actually turned out pretty good too.
So we're printing generic PLA, not the Hyper PLA, and I printed what I felt like was a complex item. This took about 14 and a half hours to print this with generic PLA settings. And then textured PEI plates are awesome.
And again, looks pretty good, and I printed without supports.
So for the sake of the video, I haven't done any upgrades to this machine. The only thing I've done is ordered the textured build plate, which is great, same with this one. And then I printed this top mount thing because the glass smushes the white tube, and it can cause under extrusion, and it's a common upgrade for this machine. So that's all I've done to this machine. I will probably do a few upgrades to it after this video, but for sakes of comparison, it's just not fair to change the extruder and say it's apples to apples, as it wouldn't be. So the main issue I have with this machine is the auto bed leveling isn't nearly as good as the Bambu. I don't know what all goes into that, but as it's printing and you look at that first layer, you can see high and low spots in the print bed. People do go shim them to get a smoother mesh, which is what I will probably end up doing after this video. But I wanted to keep it as true to out of the box as possible to give it the most genuine review.
And then here's a video of how much it smushes down that bow down tube, I believe it's called. And it's just quite a hard angle and I just wasn't very happy with it. So I printed that riser. I believe the new K1 and K1 Maxes come with a different top, as I've seen them in the forums. It's like a clear plexiglass riser thing, so they did solve that issue, but I found this at Printables and it worked just fine. I'm not going to take this all off because it kind of locks on there, but you can see, look how high this tube sticks up. So if that glass is on there, you're bending that thing pretty hard, and you can see it clearly rubbing against the top of the glass. Once you put this is glass, by the way, put the cover on there, it gives that tube that room to go in there nicely. I've even seen people 3D print a deal to run the spool straight into the machine. Okay, and speaking of this glass, so glass, and if you watch Uncle Jesse, you know that he shattered his. So be careful with the door. If it opens too fast, I've seen them shatter in Uncle Jesse's video and people complaining in the forum. So glass, and the sides are just not glass. They're like a plastic plexiglass material. So I'm also gonna 3D print a riser for this because this drag chain rubs on this rail here. You can see all the wear from this thing just rubbing on there. I don't know if it's gonna cause a problem, but again, I don't like how crammed it is, so I'll just print a little, half-inch riser here just to get this not rubbing against that. Okay, here's an example of the bed not being level. Over here you can see it's like perfect. But then the further you get this way, it almost looks like under extrusion. So based on that, I'm just blaming that the auto level isn't perfect and the bed mesh probably isn't the best. And I haven't had adhesion issues. Everything sticks just fine. But it's just something I noticed. And you can open this up if you type in the IP address, but if you scroll down here, you can see my bed mesh has a hard dip. And I just think that auto level isn't fully compensating for that hard fall off.
The build area on this machine is 300 millimeters cubed or whatever, and this one is 256. And all the Bambu printers are 256. I don't know about their new little printers, but that's what's most intriguing, why most people are going to probably want to buy the K1 Max over the Bambu, is simply the build area. I have a big head, and there's no way I could print this helmet inside here on this machine, just because you have to scale it up a little more than standard, and it's just not going to fit in this machine. So if you're into big stuff like that, this is definitely an option.
And then I'll just show you how the supports came off of the helmet model. So let's take a closer look at this helmet we printed. This was printed in the K1 Max, and overall it looks really good. You can see a little bit where it ended there. These eyepieces didn't print the best. It could have just been my print orientation of the pieces itself. You can see here a little bit of shadowing through that back part here. You can see a little riveting in there. If you were to sand these and spray paint them, you'd never know. Also the eyes, you can't see through them. I don't know if you're supposed to, but when you look through it, you can't see through the eyes very well. They just didn't print that well. But overall, the quality of the helmet's great. The only weirdness I had was the bottom here, but I also didn't have any supports supporting that area. And I'm gonna put an 1/8 inch foam pad in there, so you won't see that anyway, so overall it doesn't really bother me. There's a little bit of blowout here, but overall I think the quality of the helmet looks great. The texture helps to hide any imperfections. Just look how smooth and clean that is. So I'll print a stand for it, and that'll be pretty much it. But overall, I'm happy with the print quality of it. I mean, there could have been some better spots, but overall it looks good. If you're interested in this helmet, we're actually going to give it away on our Patreon. We don't have any members yet, but we're just firing it up as we're trying to go
hard on YouTube for 2024. And if you're interested in this helmet, a paid patron will win this and we'll send it to you for free. US only, unless you want to pay shipping. But yeah, Patreon link down below. So the two major differences between these printers is price and size. They do have a lot of similar bells and whistles, but these start at about $800, and I think this was $1,400 with the AMS. I think you can get the P1P with the AMS for about $1,000, and these I think retail for $900, but they do have a lot of sales. I've seen them as low as $600. I've seen people get floor models from Micro Center for like $200-300 or something crazy.
And at the time of making the video, here's the prices: $764 on sale, originally $900 for the K1 Max. And then the P1S is $700 without the AMS, and then with the AMS, it's $950. That probably doesn't include shipping. And then here's the printer I have. It was $1,450. Without the AMS, it's $1,200.
Okay, so the interface, love it. This screen is great. The responsiveness of it's pretty good. Clicks nicely. And it's extremely similar to the Bambus. So I would say they're equal on the display. They're about the same size. I think the Bambus is actually a little bit bigger looking close up to it. So my main complaint with the Bambu is this little wall here. They make a thing you can 3D print, like a little ramp, so you can clean this stuff out easier, or just vacuum it, whatever works for you. But on the Creality, there is no lip, so I can just kind of take it, sweep it off into my hand, and dispose of it. I don't think you can put a flash drive in the Bambu. There is this little micro SD, which is fine. I just send everything via the cloud through the Bambu slicer, which is super easy. The Creality, on the other hand, has this little USB drive right in the front, which is great.
You can also send the Creality over the cloud too, or Wi-Fi or whatever. That's usually how I do it.
Sometimes they put these drives in weird spots. Like that one has it on like the back top. So now we're gonna run a Benchy test. I'm gonna run a Benchy in this machine with the stock preloaded Benchy settings with the Hyper PLA. I'm gonna do the same thing with the Bambu and their stock Benchy settings with the PLA that came with the machine. I still have a little bit somewhere. And then we'll print the same thing on both printers with the same exact roll of filament and just see which one looks better. Okay, so we're loading this filament in here, and this is just one thing I've also noticed. I don't know if it's just me or what, but it's pretty annoying. But when you're loading the filament, it gets stuck in the filament sensor. The filament sensor works every time. I haven't had that failed. But when you're trying to load it in there, it just gets caught on something. I'll have to try to take it apart. Oh, there we go. And see what it is. Print. Started. Just over 4 minutes in, K1 Max is printing. Bambu still working on bed leveling. Okay, so it's officially printing. We'll just say it was a little past 8 minutes. So about an 8-minute startup sequence. So I just realized I messed up. The texture plate's supposed to be at 55 Celsius. Oh, it failed. I blew it. We'll have to start that one over. Okay, so that was my fault. I'm just gonna, after this one finishes, I'm just gonna run them both again, and then we'll just jump to the end. And you can hear they're both running, and I would, again, the sound's probably about equal. This one runs a little bit louder, I'd say, when the main fan kicks on, but overall, I'd say they're pretty comparative in noise. Would I want it in my bedroom? No. In my basement, I don't think you'd hear it. Just over 21 minutes, the Benchy is done. Bambu is printing the top part. We are at, we'll just say 26 minutes. So I am gonna print one more with the texture PEI sheet since I printed 2 with this machine. So I'm using everything stock settings. I'm just manually raising the bed temp to 55. But everything else is the stock Benchy settings in here. So this one's printing flawless. All I did was crank the bed temp. So the first time was definitely my fault. Watch how easy this stuff comes off once it's cooled. No glue or nothing. Another thing to mention about this printer is they kind of like set their benchmark around their Hyper PLA. So their 16-minute Benchy is quoted with their Hyper PLA and their settings. So I pretty much just use Sunlu, and I run multiple printers and just run it on the same brand in most of my printers. It'll have some hit or miss prints, like the eyes on this, for instance. It's just sometimes it'll just print weird, and then the next time it'll just print perfectly. So I don't know. So I guess we'll see how this thing holds up over the course of the next year or whatever, but overall I've been pretty happy with it. So I'm loading the filament again to run the same project on both printers with the same filament. And if you cut the filament at a 45-degree angle, it slides through the no filament detector. Way easier. Printed on the K1 Max, printed on the Bambu. So first we look at the Benchies. I printed 2 of these, and they look, I'd say they're pretty consistent. Then 2 Benchies on the Bambu, all with the stock filament and stock settings. Again, those both look similar. I had Jess look at these as well, and she said she couldn't find enough of a difference to know which machine it was, as I didn't tell her which machine printed what. So the average person's never gonna be able to tell the difference of these Benchies. They're both, the white's very hard to focus. Lesson learned, no more printing white on YouTube. Okay, so this is the first box I printed. I just wanted to have a nice straight wall to show you. And this is on the K1 Max, stock profile, Sunlu, PLA. You see we got a little bit of some zits on there, so just I can play with the temp and try to figure that out. There's also a layer shift, but overall it looks pretty good. Minus the layer shift and a little bit of ribboning in there. Then here's the Bambu. You can see just how much better that looks. There is these little holes at the start and stop points of the Z. I can play with the flow or the retraction to clear that up, but overall, this looks so good. This one, you can see there's a little bit of under extrusion in the bottom there. Okay, so then I tweaked the settings a little bit, and this one looks way better. This is the K1 Max. Still a little bit of zitting, but if I lower the temp or play with the retraction, that should clear it up. This one also has a little bit of under extrusion, but overall, it looks pretty good. Then this is the Bambu after a slight tweaking. Flawless. Like, this looks so good. Beautiful. So the easiest way to have good prints on the machine you're running, especially with these enclosed printers, would be to use the filament they suggest. So with Creality, you're gonna wanna use the Hyper PLA. That'd be the easiest situation to get perfect prints because you're not gonna have to tweak anything really. Same with the Bambu. You're gonna wanna use the Bambu filament as they already have all the calibrations done inside of there. So that'd be the easiest step. I just wanted to throw different filaments at it, and the boxes are printed with the same exact roll of PLA. And if you're gonna run the same filament, you can just run a bunch of calibrations. So for instance, I ran this pressure advance test on the K1. You can see there's some ribboning in there, but that's kind of common with the K1 Max, I believe. But there's just a lot of calibrations you can run. Then there's these temp towers that prints it at a different temp as it goes up to find the right temp for your filament. And then this one was printed on the Bambu. So there's a lot you can do to get a lot better results, but this kind of just sums up the K1 Max and the Bambu. You can just throw a lot more at the Bambu with less calibration and get like far better results. This thing is dang near flawless. Then this is the K1 Max. I mean, you could tweak this a little more to fix all the little lines, but overall, like, it looks pretty good. And this is just a few small tweaks. You could really dial these in if you wanted. So I printed one more, and this one looks dang good. This is the K1 Max. Mess with the pressure advance and the flow a little more, but that one's looking good. What printer would I buy if I only had $1,000? Personally, I would buy a Bambu P1S with an AMS. That's just the route I would go. It's just way easier to use, pretty much zero tinkering. Even the P1P is fine if you don't want the enclosure. This is a great printer. It just has a lot of little nuances to it. And again, I feel like they just kind of rushed it to market, and there's just a lot of small issues that could have been fixed with a little bit of testing. They're on their 3rd extruder. So if you want the extra build plate area, I think it's a great option. If you can get this thing on sale for $600 or less, I think it's a steal. but be aware you're going to have more tinkering and playing around with this thing. If you have prior 3D printing experience, it's going to be a lot less of a headache. They are pretty good if you reach out and ask for the different parts if it's not running right. But again, just don't rush the product to market and just make it a little more structurally sound. And that's the end of the video, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it. Overall, the K1 Max is a good printer, especially if you can get it for a good price. But overall, I think the Bambu is a little bit better, but it also has a higher price tag. Again, check out our Patreon if you want to support us. Hope you all have a wonderful day.